The email came on a Tuesday. Not a call, not a letter. An email sent at 11:47 p.m. with a subject line that read, "Family decision, final." I was sitting in my car in the hospital parking garage, still in my scrubs, eating a granola bar because I hadn't had time for lunch or dinner. I almost didn't open it. I almost drove home, took a shower, fell into bed like I did every other night after a 12-hour shift in the billing department. But something about those two words, family decision, made my stomach drop before my eyes even processed the body of the message. After much discussion, your father and I have agreed that your continued interference in our financial matters is no longer welcome. You are not to contact us, your brother, or anyone in this family until you are ready to apologize and accept your role. We have also informed Aunt Patrice of your behavior. This is final. My mother had signed it with her full name, not Mom. Not even her first name alone. Her full legal name, like she was filing a complaint with HR. I sat in that car for a long time. The garage smelled like exhaust and concrete. Someone walked past, pushing a cart of supply boxes. The fluorescent light above my windshield buzzed and flickered. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I thought I would. Instead, I opened my laptop bag, pulled out my personal notebook, the one I'd been keeping for 3 years. Every entry dated, every number logged. And I ran my finger down the last page of figures. Then I closed it, started the car, and drove home. In accounting, when a client stops paying, you don't chase them with apologies. You document everything, you secure your assets, and you send a final notice. Then you close the file. I had some closing to do. My name is Tessa, and I'm 31 years old. I'm a CPA at a mid-size healthcare company, which means I spend my days making sure other people's numbers make sense. It's detail work. Patient work. You can't fudge a balance sheet. Every entry has to match. Every column has to reconcile. Or eventually, the whole thing falls apart. My family never understood that. They thought numbers were flexible. Suggestions. Approximate. My mother, Diane, has always treated money the way some people treat weather. Something that happens to you, not something you plan for. My father, Robert, has the same philosophy, though he dresses it up in bluster and authority, so it sounds like wisdom. My younger brother, Theo, learned from both of them and then doubled down. For most of my adult life, I was the one who kept the numbers from crashing. Not because anyone asked me to. Nobody ever asked. Not formally. It just happened. I was the one who answered the phone when the late notices came. I was the one who wired money when the mortgage was 3 months behind. I was the one who sat across from my parents at their kitchen table with a spreadsheet and said, "Here's what's happening. Here's what we need to do." And they would nod and thank me, and 3 months later, we'd be right back where we started. The first time I bailed them out, I was 24. Fresh out of my master's program, first real job, barely $2,000 in savings. My father called on a Saturday morning. The tone in his voice, not scared, exactly. More like inconvenienced, like the engine light had come on, and he needed someone else to deal with it. "We're a little short this month," he said. The HOA sent a notice. A little short turned out to be $4,200 in back dues plus penalties. If they didn't pay, the HOA could put a lien on the house. I paid it. I told myself it was a one-time thing. That's what you tell yourself. Over the next 7 years, I paid for my father's transmission replacement when he didn't have time to deal with the warranty claim. I paid 3 semesters of Theo's community college tuition because he'd missed the financial aid deadline. Twice. I co-signed a personal loan for my mother so she could refinance a credit card that had ballooned to $19,000, most of it spent on home decor and a vacation to Sedona she took with her book club. I kept a ledger. Not out of spite, just habit. Numbers are how I process things. The total, when I added it up last year, was $61,400 over 7 years. That's not counting the hours I spent on the phone with collection agencies on their behalf, or the weekend I flew home specifically to help my father file an insurance claim he'd been ignoring for 4 months. None of it was ever repaid. None of it was ever really acknowledged. My mother once said at Christmas dinner, "Tessa's so good with money, the way you'd compliment someone on their ability to parallel park." A useful skill. Convenient. Not something you'd think to thank a person for. Then Theo got engaged. His fiancée, a woman named Priya, seemed reasonable enough on the surface. I met her twice at family dinners. Quiet, watchful. She had a way of looking at you that made you feel like you were being evaluated. I didn't dislike her exactly. I just noticed that every conversation she had with my parents ended with them looking slightly dazed, the way people look after a very good sales pitch. 2 months after the engagement was announced, my mother called me. "We want to contribute to the wedding," she said. "Something meaningful. Not just a check." I waited. "We were thinking of giving them the Clearwater property as a wedding gift." The Clearwater property was a small lake house my grandparents had built in the 1970s. When my grandmother passed, she left it jointly to my mother and her sister, Aunt Patrice. It had been in the family for 50 years. My mother owned half. "That's a big gift," I said carefully. "It's family," my mother said, in the tone that meant the conversation was over. What she didn't mention, what she conveniently left out, was that the Clearwater property had a shared maintenance fund that Aunt Patrice and I had been quietly contributing to for years. The roof replacement 2 summers ago, I put in $8,500. The dock repair the year before that, Aunt Patrice covered most of it. I covered the rest. My mother had contributed exactly nothing. Because my mother never had anything left over, because my mother spent money the way water finds cracks. Aunt Patrice called me the same evening. "Did your mother tell you what she's planning?" "She mentioned it." A pause. Then, "Tessa, she can't gift what she doesn't fully own. And even her half, there are tax implications. There's the maintenance fund. There's the question of what happens to the property if the marriage doesn't last." Another pause. "I need you to talk to her." So I tried. I put together a one-page summary. Not a lecture, just the facts. The estimated property value, the capital gains exposure, the outstanding fund contributions, the options for a structured transfer versus an outright gift. I emailed it to my parents with a note that said I was happy to talk through any of it. My father called me that night. "Where do you get off sending something like that?" I told him I was just sharing information. "You're trying to control things," he said. "You've always done this. Always have to be the smart one in the room." I told him I was trying to make sure no one got hit with a tax bill they weren't prepared for. "Priya's family thinks you're jealous," he said. "Frankly, so do I." I hung up. Not dramatically. I just put the phone down. 3 days later, the email came. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold while I worked. First, the joint account I'd been using to pay their cell phone plan. My name was the primary account holder. I'd set it up 6 years ago when the family plan made financial sense and my parents couldn't manage the login. I logged in, removed their lines, and transferred the account to a single user plan in my name only. They'd get a notification in 48 hours when the lines went inactive. I felt no particular way about it. Second, the autopay I'd set up for my father's roadside assistance membership, $17 a month, automatic. A thing I'd set up so casually, I'd almost forgotten about it. I canceled it. Not out of cruelty. He was perfectly capable of paying $17 a month. He'd just never had to, so he never did. Third, and this one required more thought, the family's shared storage unit. When my parents downsized 4 years ago, I'd rented a climate-controlled unit in my name to hold the overflow, furniture, boxes of old documents, my grandmother's things. I paid the monthly fee. My parents accessed it freely. It contained, among other things, a filing cabinet with their tax returns going back 15 years, and a box of documents related to the Clearwater property. I didn't close the unit. Not yet. But I changed the access code. Then I opened my personal email and wrote one message to my accountant. I told her I needed to formally document the contributions I'd made toward the Clearwater Property Maintenance Fund with dates and amounts, and that I needed her professional letterhead on it. "Can you have it ready by Friday?" I asked. "I can have it ready by Thursday," she wrote back, "at midnight, because she is the most reliable person I know." I closed the laptop and went to bed. I didn't feel righteous. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt the way I feel at the end of a long reconciliation. Like the books were finally, quietly, accurate. I didn't hear from my parents for 11 days. Then Theo called. He didn't open with hello. He opened with, "Do you know what you've done to Mom?" I said I'd received an email informing me I was no longer welcome to be in contact with the family. That's not the point. I asked him what the point was. The point is, you embarrassed Priya's family. You sent some passive-aggressive memo implying we don't know what we're doing, and now her parents think we're disorganized. I said the memo was a one-page summary of tax exposure and shared property obligations. Priya's father is an attorney, Theo said, voice rising. He said your little document was condescending and designed to interfere. I thought about that for a moment. Priya's father, the attorney, had apparently read my document closely enough to have opinions about it. If he's an attorney, I said, then he knows everything I wrote was accurate. Theo hung up. 20 minutes later, my mother called from a number I didn't recognize. A neighbor's phone, I think, because she knew I'd blocked her cell. Tessa, this has gone far enough. Her voice was doing the thing where it shook slightly, calibrated for maximum effect. She'd had that voice my entire childhood. It meant she was about to say something she expected me to argue with. Your father and I have given you everything. We sacrificed. Mom, I said, I need you to stop. Silence. I'm going to say this once. I have documentation of every dollar I've contributed to this family since I was 24 years old. I have $61,400 logged, with dates and amounts. I have the maintenance records for the Clearwater property with my contributions attached. I have it all, professionally documented, on my accountant's letterhead. More silence. I am not asking for repayment, I said. I'm telling you that I know what the record shows. And if anyone, Priya's father, an attorney, anyone, wants to suggest that I was interfering in family financial matters out of jealousy or malice, I have documentation that says otherwise. My mother's voice, when it came back, was different. Flatter. What are you saying? I'm saying you told me I'm no longer family, so I'm closing the accounts. All of them. The phone plan went dark last week. The storage unit access code has been changed. You have 30 days to make arrangements for the unit, or I'll have the contents transferred to a public storage facility in your names. I paused. And I've retained my own attorney to review the Clearwater property transfer before it moves forward. She hung up. I sat there in the quiet of my apartment. Outside, a car went by with its bass up too loud. I could hear my neighbor's TV through the wall. I thought about the first time I wired money to my parents. I'd been sitting in my car then, too, a different car, outside a different apartment, feeling, what? Proud, I think. Useful. Like I'd finally proven something. I wondered what I thought I'd been proving. I hadn't planned to involve Aunt Patrice beyond our initial conversation. She knew the situation, she had her own concerns about the property, and I trusted her to handle her own side of it. But the morning after the call with my mother, Aunt Patrice showed up at my door with a thermos of coffee and a folder. She's my mother's older sister, and they're nothing alike. My mother floats. Aunt Patrice anchors. Sit down, she said, which is how she opens most conversations. She laid the folder on my kitchen table. Inside was a copy of the original deed to the Clearwater property, both names dated 1987. Behind that, a letter from her own attorney. And behind that, a printed copy of an email chain between my mother and Priya's family that Aunt Patrice had been forwarded, apparently by accident, apparently by my father, who had CC'd the wrong address. I read the email chain twice. In it, my mother had described the Clearwater property as being fully owned by our side of the family, with some informal contributions from extended relatives that have no legal standing. Extended relatives. Informal contributions. I put the pages down very carefully. She said that, I said. Not a question. She said that, Aunt Patrice confirmed, wrapping both hands around her coffee cup, 2 weeks before she sent you that email. I looked at the maintenance records I'd already pulled. The roof, $8,500 from me, a signed contractor invoice with my check number in the margin. The dock, $6,200 from Aunt Patrice, another invoice. Neither of us had ever asked for reimbursement because it was family property and we loved it and we thought that was enough. What do you want to do? Aunt Patrice asked. I thought about it for a long moment. I want to make sure no transfer happens until the ownership structure is fully legally clarified, including the maintenance contributions. She nodded. My attorney is already on it. But Tessa, she looked at me steadily. You need to be prepared for how your mother is going to characterize this. To Theo, to Priya's family, to whoever will listen. I know, I said. She'll say I'm jealous. That I've always been difficult. That I'm trying to ruin Theo's wedding. Yes, and none of that will change what the documents say. Aunt Patrice looked at me for a moment with an expression I couldn't entirely read. Then she nodded once and poured more coffee. The mediation was scheduled for a Thursday, 6 weeks after the email. I say mediation. My parents called it a family meeting, which is a thing people say when they want the structure of a formal process without any of the accountability. They'd rented a conference room at a hotel near my parents' house, which told me Priya's family was involved. Regular family meetings happen at kitchen tables. I arrived 12 minutes early. I wore my work clothes, a dark blazer, simple. Professional but not aggressive. I brought a binder. Priya's father, the attorney, was already there. His name was Leonard, and he had the practiced ease of someone accustomed to being the most prepared person in any room. He looked at my binder and something shifted in his expression. Barely, but I caught it. My mother came in with Theo and Priya. She didn't look at me directly. She had a specific way of not looking at someone, a careful angling of the head that she perfected over 30 years. My father arrived last. He sat down, looked around the room, and said, "Let's get this settled." Leonard opened. He outlined the proposed property transfer, a gift of my mother's half-interest in the Clearwater property to Theo and Priya, structured to minimize gift tax exposure. He'd done his homework. It was a clean document. When he finished, he looked at me. "I understand you have some concerns." "I have documentation," I said. I opened the binder. I'd had it tabbed and labeled, the way I'd learned to present findings to a board. Over the past 4 years, I've contributed a total of $14,700 to the maintenance and capital repair of the Clearwater property. I have signed contractor invoices, bank transfer records, and a formal accounting prepared by my CPA. My aunt has contributed an additional $9,400. I slid copies across the table. Those contributions were made toward a property that was described in writing to this family as having no claim from extended relatives. Leonard picked up the copy. He read it. His expression didn't change, but he went very still, the way people do when they're recalculating. "Those are personal expenses," my father said. His voice had the booming certainty that had worked on me for most of my life. "You chose to contribute to that property. Nobody asked you to." "That's correct," I said. "And I have documentation that I did, which means any transfer of that property needs to account for those contributions, or my aunt and I are looking at a claim against the estate." "This is extortion," my mother said. Her voice cracked in the middle of the word. I looked at her for the first time since I'd walked in. "No," I said. "Extortion is threatening someone to get something you're not entitled to. I'm presenting documentation of money I spent on an asset that's being transferred without acknowledgement. That's called accounting." Leonard set the page down. "Mr. and Mrs. I need a moment with my clients," he said. His voice was professionally neutral, which in attorney terms means this is a problem. My parents and Theo and Priya stepped into the hallway. Through the glass door, I watched my father's face move from bluster to something more complicated. I looked down at my binder. In accounting, there's a concept called reconciliation, the process of making sure two different records of the same transactions match up. Most people think it's just about catching errors. But what it's really about is making sure reality and the official records say the same thing. For 7 years, I had been living in the gap between those two things. The door opened. Leonard came back in alone. "My clients would like to propose a revised structure," he said. "The property transfer would be contingent on a formal reimbursement of the documented maintenance contributions to you and to your aunt prior to closing." I nodded. "Additionally," he said, and now his voice had a slightly different quality, "I want to be direct with you. The email you received from your parents and the characterization of your contributions in correspondence with my clients, that created some exposure I wasn't aware of when I agreed to represent this matter. I want you to know that I've advised my clients accordingly." I looked at him. "Thank you for telling me that." He nodded once. Then he gathered his documents and went back out to the hallway. The reimbursement came through 4 weeks later. Direct deposit, which my mother clearly hated. She'd wanted to send a check, I think. Something she could hand over with ceremony, make into a moment. Direct deposit doesn't give you that. It's just a number appearing in a column, accurate and unremarkable. I transferred Aunt Patrice's portion to her the same afternoon. Theo and Priya got the property. The transfer went through cleanly, with all the right documentation. No liens, no claims. Priya's father wrote the paperwork himself. I don't know if Theo understood what had actually happened. I didn't call him. I didn't expect the $61,000, or the phone plan, or the storage unit. I don't know if he ever asked. My parents and I have not spoken since the mediation. My mother sent me a birthday card in March. No note inside, just her name, signed the same way she'd signed that first email. Her full legal name, as if we'd never met. I kept the card. Not as evidence. Not for any strategic reason. I kept it because I've been trying to figure out what it means to grieve people who are still alive. People who chose, clearly and in writing, to make you extended. There's no clean document for that. No column it reconciles into. I still go to Clearwater sometimes. I have since I was a child, and Aunt Patrice has never asked me to stop. I take the same back road off the highway, the one that smells like pine and that particular kind of lake mud in summer. I sit on the dock I helped repair, and I watch the water and I think about what it costs to love people who keep very different books than you do. Last fall, I found a photo tucked into a box I'd left in the storage unit. Me at maybe 8 years old, standing at that same dock, squinting into the sun, wearing a life jacket 2 sizes too big. I looked proud of something. I don't remember what. I took the photo home. I put it on my desk where I can see it from where I sit when I work, not as a reminder of who I was, as a reminder that the girl in that picture deserved better accounting than she got. And she figured that out, eventually. And that's not nothing. That's actually everything. Stop keeping books for people who don't believe in records. Your labor has a value whether they acknowledge it or not. And one day, if you document it carefully enough, even the people who denied it will have to sit across a table and watch the numbers say exactly what you always knew they said. I keep thinking about that photo. Me at 8 years old, standing on the Clearwater dock in an oversized life jacket, squinting into the sun like I already knew something was coming, but hadn't figured out what yet. I didn't put it away. I put it on my desk, right where I can see it when I'm working. And sometimes, in the middle of reconciling a balance sheet, I'll glance at it and think, she did okay. She got there. What I've learned isn't something you can summarize in a sentence. It took 31 years and a binder full of receipts. But here's what I know now. The way things end is almost never accidental. My family didn't lose access to the property transfer because of bad luck or bad timing. They lost it because for years they operated on the assumption that I would absorb whatever they took without ever writing it down. They treated generosity like a resource that replenishes on its own, and they treated my silence as agreement. When the silence ended and the documentation began, the whole structure they'd built on top of my labor had nothing left to stand on. That's not punishment. That's just what happens when you stop subsidizing a false version of events. I used to think the giving was the problem, that I'd been foolish or weak or too eager to be needed. But I don't believe that anymore. The giving wasn't wrong. What was wrong was the dishonesty, theirs about what they were taking, and mine about why I kept offering. I told myself it was love, and part of it was. But part of it was also the hope that eventually the ledger would balance in a different way, that if I contributed enough, they'd finally see me as someone worth keeping. That's the part I had to grieve, not the money. The math I was doing in my head about what I was worth to them. What carried me through wasn't anger. Anger burns fast and leaves you with nothing. What carried me through was the habit of clarity. The same discipline I bring to every set of financial statements I review. Look at what the numbers actually say. Don't adjust the figures to make the story prettier. Don't let sentiment corrupt the record. That kind of clear-eyed honesty takes practice. It takes the willingness to sit with an uncomfortable truth, even when the comfortable version is right there, available, easier. I had to look at my own family and say, this is what happened, not what I wished had happened, not what they told the neighbors happened, what actually happened, documented, with dates. And then I had to keep going anyway. That's the part nobody warns you about. The clarity doesn't make it hurt less. It just makes it real in a way you can actually work with. I think about Aunt Patrice showing up at my door with a thermos and a folder, sitting across from me like she'd been waiting her whole life for me to stop pretending the numbers balanced when they didn't. She didn't rescue me. She just refused to pretend alongside me. Sometimes that's the most important thing another person can do. If you're carrying a ledger in your head right now, if you know exactly how much you've given and to whom, and you've never said it out loud because saying it feels disloyal, I want you to hear this. Documenting the truth is not a betrayal. It's the most honest thing you can do for yourself and, sometimes, for the people involved. You cannot build anything real on a foundation of unacknowledged debt. Not a family, not a relationship, not yourself. The dock is still there. I went back in October when the leaves were turning and the lake was that deep gray-green it gets in fall. I sat out there for a long time, just watching the water. It felt, for the first time in a long time, like something that belonged to me.